welcome back to the Cardboard Herald podcast. I am Eric, joined as always by my lovely co-host, Jack. How are you doing today, Jack?
Well, I'm particularly good because I just won a game of King of Tokyo Duel against some fool who moved away from Juno. So, you know what? We had to settle it mano-y-mano in Tokyo.
We had to settle it on the board.
On the board game arena.
Yeah,
but no, I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Good, yeah. That was your first time using Board Game Arena. What did you think about it? We just for the audience, I showed him Board Game Arena. We played King of Tokyo Duel, which was both our first times playing that game. And Jack swamped me, I think is probably a good way of describing what happened.
Well, it's like one of those three-way tug-of-war types games, and I won handily at one of the games of tug-of-war.
You're good at tugging.
Yes, that's true. And yeah, it was my first time playing on Board Game Arena. I'd seen stuff about it in the past. I've watched some videos of people playing it, but I don't actually do a lot of digital tabletopping. I do play a decent amount of video games, but for the most part, if I'm doing tabletop games, I'm either going to be playing with other people or solo in Meat Space. I've done a fair amount of Tabletop Simulator, which is janky as hell, but fun. I enjoy it. And Board Game Arena was surprisingly just like so smooth and easy to access and set up and play. The tutorial was really good. Overall, I'm impressed, and also like 10 years behind the times.
Yeah, you made an account and we played a game in like under 30 minutes, and that was with learning the game. I like Board Game Arena a lot. It's been good. So that's a game that we just played. I like it. I think that it's fine. I think it captures a lot of King of Tokyo, like a good chunk of the essence. I wish that we interacted with the cards more, but I think we also maybe just got a bad roll of not a ton of low energy cards.
Yeah, like one of my feelings towards the boom of duel games, which I just got finished reviewing, Scales of Fate, which is the Veiled Fate upcoming duelification, which this doesn't necessarily apply to that, but there's just such an influx of these duel games, is that there's this sense that you need to have a two-player version, but is this for people who are going to want to have King of Tokyo on their shelf and to have King of Tokyo Duel? Like, I think it was good, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if there's enough there to really sell it as an independent game aside from King of Tokyo, and you would be losing a substantial amount of playability, especially for scaling to higher player groups, if you are going with King of Tokyo Duel. What I saw, it's fun. Like, it was enjoyable. I had a good time. I like the three-way tug-of-war type of thing. There are better duels out there, and I think King of Tokyo itself is still just a phenomenal game for what it's going for. And, like, it doesn't play best at 2, but is fine. So, yeah. And this is fine without the ability to scale upward.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that I can see this fitting into a niche that is... This seems like it might be a better version of King of Tokyo if you are only ever playing as two players. Like, if I'm only ever playing with my wife, and that's like the gaming group I have, it's just me and my spouse, then this could be like a really great game in comparison to King of Tokyo. And that is our topic this week, but we're going to get back to it later. It's like really easy segue, and I'm just going to divert entirely because we have other games that we've played.
Yeah, I like the idea that you opened the door and then you're like, here's a peek, but we're shutting this now. We'll get back around to it. Kind of like they did in the tutorial. They were like, hey, here's these tokens. We're going to put one on the board,
They
but
did do that.
we'll come back to that.
Twice.
What else have
Twice
you
they
been
did
playing?
that.
Yeah, yeah.
I haven't had a ton. I mean, I've had some things going on, so I haven't been able to play a ton of games. But I did get a game of Witchcraft played. I don't know if
Nice.
you know about this game.
Yes, that's the solo. Is that Trevor Benjamin and
David Thompson and also
Thompson?
Roger Tanksley. Yeah. I didn't hear of it. I recently, just to start the long rabbit hole of how I got to this game, bought a copy of Senate or Senate magazine,
Yeah.
because I haven't had a copy. I know that it existed, but I was like, I should just get like a copy to read. And in that edition, they had a article about games about witchcraft, and this game was listed there. And I was like, a solo only game about witches by Trevor Benjamin, David Thompson, and Roger Tanksley. I'm here for it, and I went out and got a copy. I like it a lot. It's a really cool little game. I think that I haven't gotten to. They have a campaign thing in there, which I think isn't like that. It's not like a legacy game, but it's like these are 9 games that you can play that are like set in stone. Because normally you like randomize what villagers you need to convince. Like the core concept of the game is you are playing as a witch coven that is trying to prove your worth to the villagers in the village you live in without getting killed, essentially, because you have to like fight monsters and do like little tasks for the citizens of the village, because you're on trial and they're your jurors, and by doing little tasks for them, you let them know like, hey, I'm good. I'm it is helpful to have me around as a witch. I
Is
can do
this
things
a
for you.
re-implementation of the system from Resist? I know the
Yes.
same group did Resist, and I was stumbling over David Thompson's name because sometimes he goes by D. Jack Thompson, and sometimes he's David Thompson, and sometimes he's David Jack Thompson, and sometimes he's David J. Thompson. But yes, so I'm very interested in all of their work. I'm a huge fan of the Undaunted series, their various works that they've done with Osprey
Yeah.
beyond the Undaunted series, and then War Chest is probably my son's
Yeah.
favorite game. I still haven't gotten around to Resist, but I saw Witchcraft in the stuff for possible coverage at PAX Unplugged, and I looked for it and I couldn't find a copy there, but it does look really cool. I love good solo dedicated games that just kind of like understand that you're going to be playing this solo, and that way we don't have to deal with the periphery of other players, and the user interface can just be designed with the intent that one person is manipulating all of the product.
Yeah, and I think that it has a really, like, it just is it's solo only, and I think that shows in a very good way where it is there. This is a game that doesn't have a ton of upkeep that it's asking the player to do. There aren't a ton of fiddly rules that you're gonna have to keep checking the rule book for. Like it's not relying on you to have other people who also are keeping track of things, and it is all manageable for one person to focus on. Here's what's happening. Here are the options I have available to me. I don't need to think about what other people's options are. Like, this is just, it's really clean. The rules are tight, and it's solid. It's a really interesting push your luck. You have witches that you can either keep them hidden, which means they just get discarded and you keep going through your deck. Like you go through your deck pretty frequently. Or you can reveal them to get like a more powerful ability, but then they get sent to jail. Oh no.
Oh dear.
And
And when you're saying witch coven, is it like Salem, colonial era witches that we're looking at?
it's that vibe. In the game, they make a note that it is not based on any one specific place, but it is pretty. It's of that time period. So I think it takes quite a bit of influence from Salem, but then it also is just like other random witch things. They had Ichabod Crane in there as one of the villagers. So it's like
Nice.
they have other things just from that, like things that take place in that time period are represented here.
Yeah.
Ichabod Crane's each villager has missions you do for them, and Ichabod Crane's final mission is fighting the headless horseman. Is very
As
fun.
long as the headless horseman is carrying the head of Christopher Walken as the Hessian from Sleepy Hollow, then we're golden.
I just threw the game on the ground.
That's how much you love it. As far as what I've been playing, just a quick mention. I got Parks Second Edition in, and I was, I was a little, maybe not hesitant, but I didn't really have like high expectations for it because Parks already looks great, plays great. I have loved the game since it came out. I've mentioned it as one of my favorite worker placement games, which it remains. And it's, just I wasn't sure, do we need a second edition of Parks? And I kind of stand by the idea that we don't necessarily need it. I imagine that there's some like business dealings behind the scenes that Keymaster wanted to not have to like license the Parks illustrations anymore. But it has a surprising amount of cleanup in it. Aesthetically, it's a lot brighter, it's more vibrant, and it's a lot more cohesive because it's not like various travel posters that are all put together. And it very much fits. It's not the same aesthetic as Harvest, but it's clear that Keymaster is developing a sense of self and identity within the company. So it feels like it's part of their line in a way that the original didn't fit with their more contemporary titles. And there's a decent amount of change to the gameplay. Like, just as I was reading the rules, I was listing off for review purposes in a Google Doc, like, anytime that I saw something that was a rule change. And, like, just reading through, like, the first couple of pages of rules, there was, like, 15 bullet points that I had on there. It's a shortened amount of rounds. You don't accrue new trail placements every round. It's a consistent number. It's just they're shuffled up instead of the kind of accordion placement of the tiles. They're individual tokens that are placed on a fixed board. There's some really smart things that they did that kind of up some of the strategy when it comes to canteens that give you a little bit of customization. There are some cool stuff that they did with like the personal the personal goals that when you complete them you can decide to either have it give you a power or an end game bonus scoring objective. Just really nice bits of polish that I don't know that I could fully just tell people, if you have Parks and you love Parks, go get this new version of Parks. But it really seems clear that if there was one or the other, this one just seems like it is the a more experienced, vetted game studio putting something forward, and game designer in the part of Henry Audubon. So I like it. As a big fan, I'm glad I got a copy. And I imagine a lot of other people are going to be as well.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with me not having played the second edition, I would go into it with the same hesitancies that you have, which is just that this game already is great and is a beautiful looking game, and I don't know why you would need like a refresh, but Keymaster is a studio that has grown quite a bit since the first park and developed themselves a little bit more. Like they have more experience publishing games now, I think.
Yeah.
And that makes sense that they
So
would have a better product at this point.
yeah, it truly does feel like a new edition in the way that, you know, maybe not as substantial as Twilight Imperium first to second edition, or second to third, third to fourth, that kind of thing. But it it has some larger shifts. You know, there's a dice in this, which I could take or leave the dice, but I think the intent of it is to have the slightest bit of randomization. You don't always use it. You only use it when it is given to you as a reward for specific things, or if you go onto that specific trail spot. And there's a lot of smart tailoring to kind of preserve that essence, while just making it a hair more sophisticated. I think the aesthetics are really going to be, you know, like a preference thing. And there's going to be diehards who still love the original parks. But yeah, I don't know. It's cool. I like it.
But those diehards won't get the new expansions, and they're just gonna have to deal with that. I assume there will just be expansions. They haven't announced anything to my knowledge. There probably will be.
Yeah, there probably will be. But on the other hand, this already has
Yeah.
a couple elements of the prior expansions baked in. So you're getting, as a retail edition, the camps are probably the most important thing,
Yeah.
and the full set of parks that came in the second expansion parks.
Cool. Well, I'm interested to see your final finished thoughts on that, and then I'm interested to get my hands on it when I get the chance, or just play it with you next time I see you.
Yeah.
Maybe in June.
No, I think we're going to end up getting a copy your way, because I want to see a dedicated solo take on it. Solo parks was one thing that I liked but didn't necessarily love.
Yeah.
I did play it solo the other day, and I did really enjoy it, but I think you'll have more of an eye for it now.
What is going? Whenever you give a thumbs up, it's we've changed platforms we're going on. I thought this was a Skype thing, and now I think it's just, are you filming on your phone?
I mean, I am filming on my phone.
This could be an Apple thing.
It could be an Apple thing. If you thumbs up, does it give you anything? Nope.
No.
Maybe it's an Apple thing.
Well, for viewer listeners, when he gives a thumbs up, there's like a fun little animation that plays with bubbles of him giving a thumbs up. And then it gives a second thumbs up to complement your original thumbs up.
You know, compliments and thumbs upping are great social interactions for, you know, like building a rapport and like a sense of community with other people, which might be an important thing if you were to want to form a game group. Wouldn't you say, Eric?
And that's the podcast, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We're ending it there. Nailed the segue, and we are wrapped up. So that's the topic we chose this week to chat about. Just because I feel like, one, it's a thing that it's so amorphous that there's a lot of different thoughts you can have on it, where how do you build a game group is interesting. Like, how do you build that community? And the different ways you can go about doing that. And then also just, like, how important is it to have a game group? How important is it to have just like people you can play games with on a consistent basis versus just having like a random board game night that you go to where you play with random people. And
Yeah.
I think that there's validity to both, but I would say my most successful venture in building a board gaming group, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to everybody, but it worked for me, is buy things off Facebook Marketplace. Because that's how I met
Yeah.
Jack. And
Yep.
it worked out pretty well for me. Not necessarily the solution to everybody's board gaming group issues, but I mean, I think that is a way where you can just, maybe not the best way, but it's a way where you just, there are people selling board games. If you see a person selling board games that you like, one, buy the games because you probably want them regardless. But then clearly that's a person who likes board games, and there's a saying that I've seen that it is easier to turn a board gamer into a friend than a friend into a board gamer. Where it's easier to get people who are already really into board games to play the board games you want to play, like the deeply strategic ones, than just your friends who aren't really board gamers.
Yeah, I
get
think
them up there.
I think there's truth to that. I mean, it all comes down to what type of board gaming that you want to do. I mean, you're no less of a board gamer if you want to play lighter or what would often be described as like more casual games. And those are probably easier to start forming game groups around. Like if you like playing apples to apples or, like something as heavy as Carcassonne, like that's going to be a pretty easy social thing to set up. Whereas if you're wanting to get people to play Gloomhaven or TI or, like any number of mid to heavier weight games, yeah, that's going to be a more substantial thing. As far as Eric and I's friendship, I'm not sure what the exact like exchange was there, who invited who or whatever, but in life I tend to be a very gregarious, hopefully earnest. I try to do everything with earnesty, and I try to approach positivity and like assume goodness in other people, and that may get on other people's nerves sometimes. I'm not sure, but I assume if you're serving me coffee, you're my friend. If you're here buying board games from me, you're my friend. If my dog accidentally jumped on you in the middle of the woods, like my dog did to some person in the middle of the woods today, then I'm going to assume you're my friend and we need to do some like conflict resolution, and we're going to de-escalate this, but we're going to do that with respect and kindness and earnest behavior.
Was it Which
dog?
was it? Bastion?
No. I think it was Nora, and I think it's whatever. I think that person was really ready to have like an angry, yelling time, and when I agreed that it wasn't okay, and I'm sorry, and is there anything I can do to help, and are they okay? Like, how would you like to resolve this? It really disarmed them because they went from shoulders back yelling behavior to like, well, it's just not cool, man. And being like, yeah, it's not cool, but I really appreciate you telling me. Is there anything I can do for you? And that just kind of diffused it. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make with all of this is I'm trying to take a grain of salt with any of my advice, knowing that for a lot of people, board gaming is an avenue to overcome social anxiety and awkwardness. And so not everyone is going to feel as comfortable when someone comes to their house to buy a board game being like, hey, if you want to learn how to play it sometime or you want to play some other board game, I'm always interested in meeting new people. Let's hang out. So like we're going to have advice. There's no one size fits all. I want to know about you moving to DC, where you've never lived before, and like what your efforts have been to meet up new gamers. Because outside of that, your wife Mim and yourself are your primary outlet for games.
So, what I did first off was go to Facebook Marketplace and buy a game.
Yeah,
It
love it.
worked. It worked twice so far. And that, so I bought a copy of Mystic Vale, like one of the first weeks I moved here, and the person I was buying it from, I was just like, "Hey, I'm new to town. I'm looking for people to play board games with." Uh, and he got me into a Discord, and I have like a group that I can play with. They meet at a bar, and we play every Wednesday. There is a board game to be played there. On So that was really good for me to just like meet a ton of people. That one definitely has a lot more. The people within the group are super welcoming, and they're really open to like have anybody who just shows up and is interested in playing board games come play. We only have 2 hours at the bar, so it's like, you're playing typically lighter games, because also that includes, we get there, we chat, people vote on what games are going to actually make it to the table, and then everybody splits off into their groups, and then there's a teach. And so you're looking at games that have like a max playtime of like 90-ish minutes for however many people. And I think that is like, that would be, I'm super happy to go to that, and that's a lot of fun. I think for bigger games though, like there are a lot of games that I enjoy that just are going to always take longer than that. Like Ark Nova, Terraforming Mars are both games that, unless you're like really, the goal is to play as fast as possible, it is difficult to get a game of that with multiple players under 90 minutes.
Right.
So there are also people who, from that board gaming group, I have been able to hang out with outside of, like going over to people's houses or bringing them here, and like just having normal game nights from there. And I think a lot of that goes from board game nights that are like out and about, like out at a bar or something, are really great ways to just meet people that are interested in the hobby you're interested in. I would say the ones that I know of are all really welcoming. So I think that
Yeah.
for some people, having like, oh, this is a board game night, I have to like really be committed to board games, or else like they're gonna judge me. I I would say from my experience that is not the case. It is
Yeah.
really easy to go to one of those events and have a good time, even if you are new to the hobby, even if you actually don't have interest and you just showed up to the bar, and now there's people playing board games around you, and oh, that one looks kind of cool, it has a big tree and animals.
Yeah, I think that board games by nature, as a hobby, uh, we gamers are incentivized to bring in more people because we want more people to play games with, right? So we're very welcoming. Whereas, say, something that's more isolated, fishing. The fishing community could be really great, but if I'm inviting more people into it, then potentially I'm inviting more crowds to my favorite spots. Like I'm inviting more people into something that I don't depend on other people to facilitate what I'm doing. So board gaming is a hobby where we want to proselytize. We want to convert people into board gamers as much as we can. There's also less priority on like niche information. So hopefully there's a little bit less gatekeeping than what might be in other hobbies. It's not like where you have this expectation that you're going to know how to play every game, because board gamers are so frequently switching from game to game to game to game to game.
Yeah.
There may be an expectation of some baseline knowledge of what is a deck building game or what is a worker placement game. Though I imagine almost anyone is going to be perfectly happy explaining those things. But nonetheless, if you're learning a game for the first time, there's a good chance that even really experienced gamers are learning that game for the first time. It's not like they've been playing Warhammer for the last 20 years and you're stepping into their Warhammer club. This is a hobby where there is a continual effort to learn.
Yeah, and I think I was just gonna I guess, reaffirm that we're all learning new board games all the time. Like, that is such a facet of the hobby. In some ways, in a bad way, with like the cult of new, where you always have to have the newest, latest games, and I think in some ways it can become not the best trait for the hobby to have. But all the time we're learning new games, so I think board gamers are always happy to teach people, because that is just such a frequent thing that you do as a person who plays board games. And
Right.
it's nobody looks down upon a person, or at least they shouldn't. And I haven't experienced it. I'm not going to say that it doesn't exist, but I haven't experienced it in the board game nights I've gone to, where people aren't going to look down at you for not knowing how to play a game.
Right. Well, as far as practical advice in trying to meet more gamers, like I was thinking about this earlier today as I was walking the dogs in the woods, and not paying attention to where my dogs were going off leash. But it was in the woods. It wasn't on a paved trail. Anyway, so I think I brought it down to like three major categories. There's either joining a pre-existing group or club, or there is trying to convert other people into gamers and getting them to play with you, or there's forming a club and trying to get people to join that, right? Those are certainly not the only ways that you can form groups, but those are probably the three most common that are out there. As far as the first one, I have
a fourth one to add that we'll get to later.
Okay, we'll get to that one. As far as the first one, joining a club, that's overall, there are so many communities that are looking for members. They're very welcoming. A great way to do that is to go to your friendly local game store. And it's always good to support local. It's always good to buy local. And one of the reasons why that's part of a healthy gaming community is that it can be a meetup spot. A lot of game stores thrive on having people physically in there playing games. A lot of game stores that do Magic or Star Wars Unlimited or various CCGs will also have a once a week or once every other week board game night. So great, that's a way to go. But you can also look at like meetup.com. I just pulled it up while we were talking earlier. Just going to meetup.com, put in board games in Chicago, and I just came up with a ton of games. And there's definitely different levels of games that are depicted. Like some of them have, some people playing some lighter card games. And then one is like, yo, this is PAX Premier here, dog. So, there's different levels to tailor you to the games that you want. If you go to almost any town or community, Reddit has a great, like community. Well, Reddit has a lot of terrible communities, but Reddit has community interaction usually at a local level, where if you go to your city or your state and you say, hey, I'm a board gamer looking for board game groups, Is there any groups that I could join, or does anyone know where people meet? That kind of thing. You'll get a lot of indications on where you can go there. And just make the connections. However you're trying to join that group, find someone within it, say, hey, I'm wanting to join this group because I'm new to the hobby, or my old group dissolved, or I'm new to town, whatever it is. And then I was hoping to play some games. Can I join sometime? So like, just find groups using technology, or using the old school method of going to your local store, see if there's a bulletin board, ask a retail employee, and see if you can get something going. They would love it if you played in their store. You're going to buy products. You're going, show that the store is thriving, and they probably sell concessions, which is a good thing there.
Yeah.
So yeah, they want that. Converting your friends. You said it's easier to convert
A board
gamers into friends.
Then friends into board gamers, yeah.
Did you convert Mim into a board gamer, or was she a board gamer that you made your wife?
It kind of happened simultaneously. No, she was definitely not that into board games before I moved up with my 3 boxes of board games. Not that she was like philosophically opposed to them, but it was just not a hobby that she had really partaken in outside of the normal, like, traditional family games. And then the thing that I think really won her over is I checked out a copy of Clank from the library, and that, like, immediately became a game that we played frequently. Like that, to me, that's a core memory of, okay, I got her.
Though there's endless amounts of discussion on, like, our board games or on Board Game Geek about spouses and couples playing games together and successes and failures. One of the tricky things about this type of gaming is you can't expect that your friends and family are going to like the things that you like in the same ways that you like, with the same level of intensity. When it works, it's great. But you don't want to, like, create some sort of animosity in an important relationship in your life by, trying to play games and clearly the other person isn't into it. But the same could be said about, like, virtually anything that couples or friends, try to force the other person to get into. But that said, your friends, your family, they are the people who they should theoretically trust you and trust your interests, and you should be able to feel out who might be someone that you could get to play games with you. I'm never going to play games with my dad. Not because he's a jerk, but I just know he would be the most uncomfortable person in the world at a game table. He was one of the first supporters of this podcast. He loves that I do this. However, he will never want to play a board game ever. Ever, ever. I never played any games with him as a kid. He will never play any board games as an adult. But that said, when my brother comes to visit, I'll play games with him. Or Christina, my wife, is one of my main gaming partners. And a lot of my friends are gamers who have become gamers on the part of I have, taught them various games. And then even, like, coworkers, that's a great thing to do as a team, like, hey, coworkers, does anyone want to play some games? Feeling out what their experience level is, kind of understanding what they might be up for. Again, you have more at stake with someone who is an established relation that you want to maintain a positive relationship with. And having a shared interest in a hobby can be something that enhances that. But really forcing something can, like cause problems in that relationship. So this is maybe to me the trickier one. But I honestly think that when handled with care and nuance, it can be one of the more fulfilling ones. I don't know. Like, what kind of success have you had with this duality that you were mentioning, the friends to board gamers versus board gamers into friends? Do you have any friends outside of MIM that you've converted, or that you like to play games with, who weren't a board gamer before you kind of introduced them?
Yeah, I have a few. I mean, I think that in Juno there were a couple people who, my dear friend Hannah, who she was like into Dungeons and Dragons already, but I was able to get her more into board games because that was a thing that we did frequently. A couple other people who like are very close friends who were not really board gamers at all. Like they would do it, but they I don't think played board games much if I was not around.
Right.
I think that you can definitely have success there. I think that you put it in a good way, which is you can't expect your friends and family to enjoy your interests in the way that you want to enjoy them. In the sense of, I don't think in some of those relationships I could pull out like Ark Nova or Spirit Island, even though that is a game
Right.
that I would want to play with them because I think that they would really enjoy it. Because that's not what they're hoping to get out of board games. Like, for them, their interest is, this is a fun thing that we can do, and it's semi-competitive, but we're still able to like chat and have like a lovely time around, without getting like bogged down by what's on the table. And I think that that is a very reasonable take.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think most board gamers, because you already have one shared interest just as a start with no other identifying information about these people, you have a shared interest.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to parlay that one shared interest into a friendship, even if it's centered around that one interest. Like,
Right.
you are just all in on, like, we play heavy board games together, and that is kind of like, we don't go outside of board games. Like, all we're doing is playing these heavy board games together because both of us have this shared interest. That's that can be a friendship that is like really strong. I think that
Totally.
is
And
more than reasonably a strong friendship.
I think that a lot of that is it's something that I've thought about as an old guy who's now cresting towards the end of my 30s here. Like, I reflect a lot on adult relationships, adult friendships. As a kid, I made friends with everyone. I guess I still make friends with everyone. However, forming close relationships is harder and harder as you get older. And I think a lot of that is because you're just exposed to so many fewer people and having to share details about your life with so many people. As a kid, when I went to a new school in fourth grade, and like one of the key things that allowed me to become friends with other kids was we all loved Final Fantasy 3 on the Super Nintendo, and so like that group of four kids were bonded for life because of course we're best friends because we're all the dorks who are like talking about how we hope to get it for Christmas or we did get it for Christmas or whatever it is. And board games is a fantastic way to have that that shared interest. That's a platform that you can kind of build a relationship on top of that. And I would say that a couple of my absolute closest friends have been built out of just a initial interest to have someone as a gaming partner. Adult relationships are a little bit different because you have to deal with like how much values play into it versus how much it's just like a shared interest. But like you can have a board game group friend, someone who is part of the gaming group, but you don't have to be inviting them to your house all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas you can form the relationship with the people who you do have more of those shared values with. So, that's, I guess we could have a whole podcast that's just on making friends. As far as the last thing, of those three categories I mentioned, creating a game group, it's much the same as finding one. But there have been multiple times in my life where I have been like, I want to do something that is more community driven. And whether it's among my friends and I'm just trying to open my house and say, every Wednesday I want to host a board game group, and my friends are going to come over, or it's something that I create out in the community. Right before COVID, like for the 7 or 8 months leading up to COVID, I had made an agreement with our local Methodist church here, because they had a great community center and they also had a daycare center that my son went to. I wasn't affiliated with the church or anything, but they were very welcoming individuals and participated in a lot of community stuff. I was like, hey, I do this podcast and write reviews about board games type of thing, and I think it would be great to have like an all ages community event, to just give something that is an alternative to the only thing that our community really offers, which is 21 and older bar stuff that happens on a Friday night. And they were like, that sounds great. Like, what do we need to do to get this going? And they just, honestly, it was kind of crazy to me that they were like, sure, how about we give you the keys to the church and then you can have it on these nights and you just clean up after yourself and then you just check in with us on a regular basis. And I was like, wow, this was way easy to form. But that was really successful. Met a lot of friends who continued being friends out of that. But that was maybe the hardest version of getting that going. But the simplest version is, going to your friendly local game store and being like, hey, do you have a game night? And if they say no, be like, would you be interested? If you have tables in here for Magic, do you think we could have like an open play type of thing on a night that is not when you're going to have peak Magic players or something like that? And if that's not available in your community, Platypus Gaming here in Juneau has had a ton of success, both with their convention, but their partnership with Devil's Club Brewery, which has some tables, is a nice welcoming setting, and just saying, hey, can we host a game night here once a week for 3 hours, 6 to 9 p.m., it'll be customers for your store. It'll be a good thing for your community, and we will take care of all the hosting responsibilities. Some of the challenges in that, if you're doing it, you will have to view yourself as an organizer, right? And that gives you additional levels of responsibility that may take you away from playing games as often. Ideally, you are still playing games, but you're responsible for, shepherding that group, setting the tone, making sure that it's safe, making sure that it's welcoming, dealing with disputes, and that can be a lot of responsibility that someone doesn't necessarily want to take on. But going back to some of those adult themes that I was mentioning of, like what it means to be an adult, I've also reflected a lot on like what are the core values I have, the core tenets, I think that every person should at least be able to do something creative. They should be able to exert some sort of labor, that's work. They should be able to create meaningful relationships. They should be able to enjoy art, and they should be able to provide meaningfully for their community. Like, one of the things that you can most get reward from and personal satisfaction is to actually invest something of yourself in your community, and forming a game group is a fantastic way of doing that.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think that there's such a want because board gaming is, for most intents and purposes, a social activity that you're doing. And I think it provides a really great alternative. Just, we're just going to sit here and do some math and score some points. And that's what we're going to do here. And I think that it is a community that's really welcoming in that, because there's so many new games to play and new games to learn, there isn't really like a huge skill issue for the most part. Like, some people will be better at some games, and that
Right.
is what it is. But it's not like quite as spread apart as like chess is. It's not quite as spread apart as like if you were to join a sports group and you've never played the sport before, you then are going to be playing against other beginners, and hopefully there's enough other beginners that you can get like the full experience versus, if it's just random teams and you're the new player on a team of very skilled players. You're not touching the soccer ball. You're not
Right.
going to
Right.
be you're not going to be able to participate in this thing that you're trying to participate in. Whereas I think, especially with board games, it is very easy to welcome new players in. It's really easy to like get people who aren't into board games. You can teach anybody some of these games, like, and they would have a ton of fun with them. Like, a lot of the smaller games, like Coup, you could introduce anybody to that game and they would get it. I think
I too have a Duke.
that's crazy. There are 7 Dukes on the board right now. That's crazy. That's an
it is
interesting
crazy
thing to note. Dukes.
God, I've played so much coup, and the amount of times where like the first 4 turns are people just all saying I have a Duke, because no one wants to challenge a first round Duke,
Nobody wants a challenge, and it's always an easy play.
I do have a last bit of advice. I think it's advice or wisdom or folly or something, but it probably would springboard better off of a listener question that we got. So before we move on to that, you mentioned that you had a 4th category. What's your 4th category?
My mystical 4th category. So the options are: join an existing game group, turn your already existing friend group into gamers, or
Right.
establish a new game group.
Yeah.
Get really into solo board games is the 4th option. You are your own
that's
game
true.
group. You are your own game group. Be the game group you want to see in this world. And by that, I mean, get really into solo games. They're very fun. There's been
Very
a
fun.
huge renaissance on them. And yeah, that's
And
my
don't-
mythical 4th option.
I've proposed the idea of doing a conversation just about the state of solo gaming in 2025, and I think that's kind of on the back burner for possible podcast ideas. But with solo gaming, something I want to add is that there is... I don't think there's a lot of stigma about board gamers anymore. Like, sure, maybe crotchety people who just are no fun nicks might be like, oh, you play board games. But I don't think there's a lot of that anymore. Like, being a nerd is cool, having fun is cool, people being enthusiastic is cool, and board games are becoming more and more and more mainstream all the time. There is a decent amount of stigma where if you tell someone I play solo games, they'll be like, by yourself? Isn't that kind of sad? You don't, because the expectation for a lot of people is that you do have other players. There is a stigma to that.
There is a little.
However, you have to boldly and confidently be like, yeah, it's like video games. People play video games all the time solo. they play video games all the time with others. Playing board games, there are so many great solo adaptations at this point. You know, when you think of solitaire as a board game, well, there's all kinds of other board games that are robust and interesting, that feel really meaningful. And almost always, whenever I've told someone that, when they've been like, solo board gaming, they've been like, oh yeah, I guess I've never thought about it like that. So maybe if you're feeling a little bit of pressure from that stigma, try it out, and also go confidently, you know, deal with the uncomfortable discussion, and I bet you'll enlighten a lot of people.
And there's a lot of games that you probably already have in your collection that just randomly have a solo mode. Try it out. It's
true.
Fun. And another thing that I just wanted to throw in, you covered a lot of the points that I would have covered.
I did a lot of talking.
Yeah, it's good. It's a podcast. That's what we're here for. That's the goal of the podcast, is for us to talk. One thing that I wanted to just add in either joining an existing group or establishing your own is there's so many avenues to play board games online nowadays. There is Board Game Arena, there's Tabletopia, there's a number of websites that you can play board games on with other people. There's also apps on your phone that are that can remove a lot of pressure of, you know, like you have to go out somewhere to play a board game, or you have to invite people into your home, and there can be pressure and weird avoidances that you might have to those situations. That playing board games online, you're still playing the games. It's probably not going to be quite the same as playing over the table, but you can do games. You can do voice calls with people. So like if you start establishing a group that you're like, oh, I've been playing this game on Board Game Arena with like this guy a couple times. They seem cool. I added them as a friend on Board Game Arena. Well, let me message, like you can get them on Discord, and then you just have like a voice call, and it's a person that you have now converted into a friend, and maybe they have a group that they play online with all the time. But that's just another option that might remove some of the barriers to entry if you're having pretty severe social anxiety over going out and meeting people in public. There are also other options to play games with a new group. What are you smiling to yourself about over there? What do you that looks like a devious smile.
Actually, it's not that devious of a smile. This is listen, I should be 100% focused and locked into this, but I have a bit of a time commitment in that I have soccer for my son coming up, which I'm very engaged in my son's soccer. And I just looked at the time and was like, oh, I should probably remind my son to get ready for soccer. And so I sent him a text saying, could you get ready for soccer? And he said, yes, sir. And that was the reply. So that official response. With my apologies for the distraction, but I do want to get to this listener question because it ties into another point that I think may be one of the challenges that people have. So Eric Hammett, 2893 on YouTube, ended up reaching out to us in response to us talking about this topic as our topic for the week. Said, how do you handle groups with 5 to 7 players when you really are the only teacher in the group? Do you run 2 games and not play either, or stick to the limited titles that can handle large numbers, or simply ask the most annoying players to not return so you can play the best Euro games at the optimal 3-player count as God intended? Which is hilarious. But it's legit.
That's a great question.
It's legit. So here's how I handle this. Because as a product of reviewing games, there are games that I have to get played at a certain schedule. And also, I like playing my other games on the shelf. And there are certain games that I really want to play just because I really want to play them. I love democracy. I do not love democracy in entertainment when it comes to like entertainment mediums. I think the best way to handle this is when you have some sort of communication channel with your friends or your game group. That might be text, that might be Discord, that might be, like Facebook Messenger, or whatever it is. Being able to tell them, hey, I really want to play Root this week. Is anyone down to play Root with me? Instead of saying, what do you want to play? I don't know. What do you want to play? I don't know. What do you want to play? And then you end up getting into just Seven Wonders because it'll accommodate 7 players. And that's the same thing that you always play. I find that leaves a lot of people dissatisfied. In this specific scenario, if I showed up and we hadn't decided on a game and we have 5 to 7 players, I probably would account for how much time that we have, what the interests of the other players are, and then I would probably try to play something that does account for everyone and is still engaging and fun for me. But then if I felt like I wish I'd use that time for something else, then have a conversation before I leave about like, hey, I really want to play this, Castles of Burgundy game. It only plays up to 4, and it probably plays best at 3. We've already played a bunch of these other games. Do you guys think that we could split up into 2 groups next week or next month, and I'll bring in this game and then you guys can play something that you've already learned, especially if you're the gamer who's teaching everything. I think that would be a good way of handling it. And you can also ask other people to take on the responsibility of teaching or learning a game. People want to lift one another up. As much as it seems, especially in the year of our Lord 2025, that people want to take each other down, when it comes to genuine relationships with other people in physical reality, my experience is that on balance, people want to lift each other up and also want to help one another and meet each other's expectations. And so if you have a group and you say, hey guys, oh man, I love being the person to teach games, but there are some games that I want to play that I just don't really have an avenue for. And because I'm the only person teaching them, I don't necessarily feel like I really have a way around this. I'm betting you that people just like hanging out in the same room with you. They'll
Yeah.
want to separate into 2 different groups. Someone will be like, "Oh, I could teach some games." Like people want to take on responsibilities that will help them feel recognized, help them feel helpful. Like I think that as with our board game etiquette podcast, communication is the key, and also be forthright about what it is you want to play. And if that group doesn't want to play it, then that's okay. You can have multiple groups, and you can either create another group or you can find another group that is interested in the types of games that you want to play.
Yeah, and I think that the idea that you have 5 to 7 players, that's pretty big. There's not a lot of games that are going to accommodate that well. There are a few that do. There aren't many that are going to accommodate that well week after week. So I think eventually you will reach the problem of we've played the games that fit this game. Like, I'm just saying, in theory, if you were to say we're always going to play games as one solid group of 5 to 7 players, you're going to reach a point where the games that play that number of players reasonably well in the time span that you have are you're going to run out of games, essentially, is my thought.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to start splitting up at some point or another. A thing that I might suggest, especially if you're in this situation where you have a group that has 5 to 7 people consistently, play a game that can play good at 3 to 4. Like, play a game that can play good at 3 to 4 that plays well at 5 to 7 as well. Like, you could do Seven Wonders, you could do Camel Up, like one of those games that can scale up or down reasonably well. Play that one week. the next week be like, hey, do like 4 of you want to play Camel Up, and then we'll have 3 people left over for this Euro? Great. And then the next week, one of the people who played the Euro with you, you can now have them teach the players that didn't play, and then some of those players can come play the new. Like, you start building an ecosystem of, you don't have to always teach new games every week. You can play games
Right.
that people already know, that you can then split off, and there won't be as much of a teach, so you hopefully can play new games and teach just the one game to 3 or 4 people who can then hopefully, especially if you like let them know beforehand that you are going to ask them to teach it to the people next week. You'll just hopefully have that sort of baseline knowledge that grows, and then you won't have to teach games every week. And kind of to your point earlier, if you are the teacher of a board game, like if you're like the teacher of your game group, you have quite a bit of sway in terms of people listen to you. You seem to know what you're talking about with board games. Suggesting that the group splits up so you can play games at more reasonable player counts will probably be accepted. And I think that if you can get people to play games that they already know and enjoy, you can make that work where you can still play the games you are hoping to play, or at least just play games at the player counts that, as you put it, God intended.
Yeah.
Which is a hilarious comment to add here. Yeah, and I think that maybe for your post, when you split off into the groups, just put yourself in the group that doesn't have the most annoying players.
Yep.
Per
Well,
your comment, that's a thing you're worried about, Eric. Could be good.
Well, I think this is one of the podcasts that most is likely to have practical advice as well as great stories of lived experiences. Yeah. So I really would love to see some comments by people who are watching this on YouTube or listening to this. Like consolidating your own experiences, because that's a big part of community, and part of what I love about the Cardboard Herald is people sharing their experiences. So more than any other time, this isn't just that podcast call to action. It's important to have a call to action.
It's important to encourage your audience to engage.
I would love to. Oh my God, it just makes me think of the Dark Prophet saga. Son of a Lich has so many good call to action moments. But anyway, put comments in about your own experiences, as well as advice to other gamers. What do you want to see, and if there's consolidated advice elsewhere that helped you, put some links to it. Let's share some resources.
Yeah, we're all here together. We're all just trying to find our game group for life. Thank you all so much for listening. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to email them to us at cardboardherald@gmail.com, or comment them on this video or audio podcast, depending on where you are consuming this content. Thank you so much for tuning in and being an awesome community. I am Eric, along with Jack, for the Cardboard Herald.
That's me. Later, guys. Bye.